Good afternoon, this is Jeff with Sewer Tech Northwest. We are at property address 589 Northeast Territorial Road here in Canby. I describe everything as if you're standing in the street facing the front of the house. So we are to the left of the front doorway, right underneath the cantilevered window here. You have a 3-inch ABS cleanout. It's one you might want to take note of where it's at. It's not only under a cantilevered part of the house, which already makes it tricky, but it's basically buried in the bark dust almost entirely. The only reason I saw this thing is the cap was sitting in here at about 90 degrees. Someone had set it on here but not actually threaded it on. So anyway, just a good one to keep an eye, just to know where it's at, because it's a little harder one to hunt down without going in the crawl space first. And then all those Indiana Jones level cobwebs there, those are just from creatures being able to get in and out of that thing. That stuff's no big deal. It'll knock loose and flow off on its own. Anyhow, we're checking the overall condition and serviceability of the sanitary sewer line. Water is running. We are zeroed out, and off we go. And right out of the gate, I am on a lucky streak today. I have never seen so many clean sewer lines in my 13 years of doing this. This line is spotless. That's exactly how you want it to look. Most notably, no grease buildup in the line. Cooking oil and grease buildup are a very, very common problem these days. Just transitioned there to PVC pipe, and it looked like we just made a step out there. I believe we just swapped over to 4-inch pipe. We'll get a nice review of that when the line's drained. And my camera is upside down right now, if you didn't figure that out. The water is not floating in the air there. And right back to PVC. There's just a 30-34 turn piece. Anyhow, if you want to keep your line this clean, and I highly recommend doing it, it comes down to just about one habit, and it's avoiding cooking oil, greases, and fats from going down the kitchen sink drain. That's the #1 culprit. It turns your line into a sticky mess that makes it not that you should abuse your sewer line, but having a line like this makes your line much more capable of handling abusive items. Now you want to wipe your pans out with a paper towel, pour the grease into a jar. You just don't want it going down the sink, and it's when you've got real quantity to deal with. You know, a little thin coating of Pam spray on your pan is no big deal. Hot water and soap handles that just fine. Alright, now we're into 30-34 PVC here. We'll check that spot out on the way out. Thus far, it just looks like a little low spot at almost 100 feet out. A belly that minor has essentially zero bearing on functionality. I mean, in general, but especially when you're at 100 feet from the home. Got a little bit more in here too. Standing water that minor has almost no chance of causing a blockage, even when it's a few feet outside your house. At 100 feet, you need a absolutely severely bad problem to get a backup under proper usage scenarios. The head pressure of the line filling up that far is extreme. This thing just keeps going and going. There we go. There's the main. About 133 feet. We're going to back up just a little bit, get out of that hard dive there. And I will do my darndest to locate. This is a very busy main artery we're on here, so if nothing else, I'll try and locate when we get back near the property line or the street edge, just to verify where the line's going. And then there's one spot in the line I do want to take a good look at. There's a settled spot there, mostly to make sure that the joints look closed off to the ground. The settling is hardly worth talking about. I do want to try and take a look at that joint, though, to make sure it looks sealed. Alright, we're going to try and kill 2 birds with 1 stone here. About need flaggers out in the street right now to go out there and locate. It's so busy. As far as I can tell, it looks like the line crosses the curb just to the left of the driveway. But we'll see here. I'm surprised how fast this line drained out. Usually these lines are this length. I mean, start to finish will often take about 5 minutes to fully drain. 3 to 5. It's a very long sewer line. It's about double the length of your average line. All right, so a little bit of standing water here that tapers off right around 110 feet. And it's a little bit. That's like barely even a 1/16 of an inch of water. And for reference, I don't even consider repairs, especially plastic lines, even that much more on larger diameter pipes like this until you have, at this distance from the house, I rarely recommend repairs on bellies. But up closer to the home, it's at least an inch of standing water. That's static with no water running at all. And even at that point in a plastic sewer line, it's still nearly entirely up to the homeowner as to whether it ever manifests itself. And by that I mean abusing the line. At that distance, that might as well not even be there as it relates to flow. This is what I want. Yeah, that's what I was worried about. When I was pulling back in there, that standing water looked like it had dirt in it. That joint right there is wide open to the ground. You've got what looks like dirt flowing through that joint there, unfortunately. And right now, because the settling is minimal, this is one you could theoretically repair by epoxy liner. I'm going to go locate and see how deep it is, but the amount of standing water you have here is very, very minimal. So it's one that if you were to shoot a liner through it trenchlessly, as long as the liner guys think they can get a good result, you don't want to just line that little joint there. You want to overlap that puppy by about 2 to 3 feet on either side to make sure you get a good seal. But it's one you could potentially do trenchlessly. However you do it, you want to get that thing fixed. Because what it's going to do is cause progressive settling. You see dirt flowing through that joint. Over time, the line's just going to keep sucking dirt out from underneath the sewer pipe, and it's going to slowly but surely turn into a belly, and very likely an offset joint, and a pretty severe one. You have quite a bit of dirt that looks like it's coming through there. Alrighty, so I tried to adjust for the fact my camera doesn't want to hop the joint now that the water's turned off, so I adjusted my marking forward a few inches or so. Anyway, here I'm getting quite a depth. I'm getting between 9.5 and 10 feet deep, and that is in the roadway. So this is one you want to contact the city about. We're about 4 feet or so beyond the edge of the driveway into the street. We're kind of in the bike lane area right now, at a very, very deep depth. So if that does fall into homeowners' territory, first and foremost, I would look into an epoxy liner for this repair. It's going to save a lot of money, not digging a 10-foot deep hole in the street. Luckily, it's off to the side of the road, and it's not smack dab in the middle of the street there, but that is something I highly recommend getting repaired. It's rained a bunch. I put a X marking on the ground. It's very likely that marking's going to wash away because of how wet it is. It's directly in line with the secondary cleanout access in the driveway, probably about 8 feet or so beyond that point. In fact, that tie-in right there, which right now is at the bottom of the screen, that's actually the top of the pipe. That's your secondary access point. You'll see a big steel plate very near the where the driveway meets the road. Underneath that's a clean-out access. Anyway, right now, because the line has not shifted much, that you'd end up with a pretty darn good result out of a liner. The liner itself, because of the thickness, will displace most, if not all, the standing water there. You have little to very, very little grade loss at all. Now, even if you end up with a 1/16 of an inch of standing water, who cares? At that distance out, it has nothing to do with anything. Having a foot of pipe with a 1/16 of an inch of water has no bearing on anything. And if you're saving the kind of money I think you're going to, I think it's worth looking into. However it's repaired, I recommend it get fixed, though. And then you want to do a rescope afterwards, check the work, especially if that's a homeowner responsibility area there. In Canby, I can't remember off the top of my head if the city takes responsibility out beyond the street edge or not. So right now, not impeding flow a whole lot, but that's something that's likely going to change in time. Got a couple little things sticking off the joint right there. Kind of bottom of the screen, about the middle and the bottom of the screen there. As far as I can tell, those appear to be burrs from a rough saw cut where someone didn't sand the plastic. You can see a bunch of them. They're very small. I don't see any evidence of dirt intrusion there. That's all that appears to be is just someone did a saw cut when they first installed this thing and didn't sand the burrs off it all the way. even if those were theoretically to be roots, they're so small you can't even discern what they are. But I've cameraed almost 25,000 sewer lines, thousands and thousands of root intrusions. There's just not enough there to even verify, but that looks far more like plastic burrs. They're more white in color than they are a root-esque color, which is generally brown. And you usually will also have secondary signs. Not only will roots be coming through, but you'll also have dirt staining around the pipe joint, where dirt is seeping through. Similar, but not quite as spectacularly as that separated pipe joint out there around 95. I got to go back and review the video for the distance out. That is, it's around 95 feet if I recall. Trying to flip the camera around here to go backwards for a moment. There we go. Well, that right there is the dive down as the line exits out of the house. So at this point here, we are now back inside the crawl space. All this pipe is exposed piping. The home inspector takes a look at that stuff. And the little danglies that were just there a moment ago, again, cobwebs. I mean, aside from that one pipe joint there, the rest of the line looks fantastic. Normally lines that are this length, especially on a flat property like this without a slope to it, usually we're looking at bellies that are 20, 30 feet long with an inch or more of standing water. So it's a bummer about that pipe joint because the rest of the line was very nicely installed. Anyway, highly recommend a repair there at that joint. First and foremost, contact the city. I do have a picture of that I can forward on to an agent, so the city can take a look at it. It's a shot looking at the house, so you can kind of see where it is relative to the home. But it is in the roadway, so that you know, may very well fall into city territory. If not, obviously I recommend a repair on it, and I highly recommend a rescope afterwards to check the work. It's very important to do that. Whether you do a dig style repair or an epoxy liner, if you do a dig or open trench type repair, you want to do the rescope after the line is buried, not beforehand. Especially with a line buried almost 10 feet deeper in that realm, your likelihood for settling issues goes up dramatically with that kind of weight on the line, especially in a spot repair format. So you want to make sure there's a load on top of this thing before you button it up. You know, what I always say is bury it, compact it, get it ready to pour asphalt, do the rescope. At that point, you put all the weight on it, it's just about going to have, and you know with certainty at that point if it's going to shift on you or not. Otherwise, the rest of the line here looks great, has good flow. If for some reason repairs are not done right now and that falls into homeowner responsibility, I would certainly be checking that out frequently. I mean, at least once a year. The hard part is we don't know when it happened. If that happened all of a sudden recently, sometimes the settling from those kinds of joints can be quite aggressive and very fast. The last thing you want is to have that settle to the point where you cannot do a liner on it anymore. If you start developing a huge offset joint or a nasty belly in that area, and that can affect not just the joint but the pipe before and after it if it does enough hydro erosion. So you want to keep an eye on it if it's not fixed. Everything else here looks great.